He didn't lose a kingdom in a war, he lost it in headlines, phone calls that stopped being answered, and one brutal realization: he was flying back alone. The story exploded before sunrise, the kind of whisper that starts in diplomatic corridors and ends screaming across every front page by lunch. Insiders murmured that his American chapter was closing fast, not with a triumphant farewell tour, but with paperwork, deadlines, and doors quietly shutting. The image was almost unbelievable. A prince who once shook hands with presidents now pacing a California mansion, watching his future shrink to the size of a departure gate. For months, the narrative had been carefully curated: power couple, global deals, philanthropic empire, streaming cameras, glossy magazine spreads. But behind the filters and curated smiles, something had shifted. Meetings got postponed, calls got shorter, the invitations that once flooded in like confetti began to dry up. Hollywood, always loyal to momentum, had started looking over their shoulders for the next big thing. And suddenly, the prince who bet everything on reinvention was staring at the possibility that the reinvention had an expiration date. Back in Britain, the mood was different, colder, quieter, more calculated. Palace walls don't shout, they freeze you out. Courtiers who once rushed to smooth over every stumble had adopted a new strategy: stillness. No emotional statements, no dramatic rescues, just a calm, almost surgical distance. The message wasn't delivered in words, but everyone understood it. Actions have consequences, even royal ones. And then came the part that stung the most. He didn't call the press. He didn't stage a speech. He reached for family, old numbers, old bonds. The kind of calls you make when pride is already cracked. But the silence on the other end said more than any argument ever could. The institution he walked away from had learned to walk without him. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the spin machine kicked into overdrive. Soft focus photos, carefully worded captions about peace and privacy. But the internet has a cruel memory, and sympathy is a currency that devalues fast. Every post was dissected, every smile analyzed, every sentence measured against years of interviews, documentaries, and tell-all revelations. The public mood had shifted from fascination to fatigue. Inside their world, the tension reportedly thickened. Not the dramatic shouting kind, the colder version, where two people realize the fairy tale script they sold the world no longer matches the numbers, the headlines, or the future. One wanted to fight louder. The other was said to be staring at the wreckage and wondering when the battle turned into a siege with no exit. Back home, the monarchy didn't rage. It reorganized. Younger faces stepped forward. New engagements. New patronages. Fresh photographs of continuity, stability, duty. The visual message was devastating in its simplicity. The crown is a relay race, not a solo act. And the baton had already been passed. What made the situation even more brutal was the contrast. While one household was scrambling behind gates in California, another was calmly cutting ribbons, visiting hospitals, and smiling with the ease of people who know exactly where they belong. No public jabs, no messy interviews, just presence. And in royal optics, presence is power. As the pressure mounted, something changed in him too, according to those watching closely. The defiance that once fueled bold exits and explosive interviews seemed to give way to something quieter. Regret doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it looks like a man rereading old messages, replaying old moments, and realizing that bridges don't just burn, they collapse behind you, leaving nothing but smoke and distance. By the time travel rumors hardened into near certainty, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. Not a grand return, not a negotiated reconciliation, just a flight, one seat, one man who once stood on a palace balcony now preparing to land without ceremony, without guarantees, and without the partner who helped him build the life he was now leaving behind. The tragedy, because even scandals have tragedy buried inside them, is that this was never just about geography. It was about identity. He tried to prove he could be powerful without the crown, influential without the structure, loved without the lineage. And for a while, it looked like he might pull it off. But the world is less forgiving when the spotlight dims, and independence feels very different when the safety net is gone. As departure loomed, the fairy tale had fully flipped. The rebel prince wasn't storming out anymore. He was circling back, not in triumph, not even in anger, but in something far more human: the need for roots when the spotlight fades. The same institution he once described as suffocating now stood as the only place that still carried his history, his childhood, his mother's memory echoing through corridors he knew by heart. But here's the twist that makes this story sting. Going home doesn't mean getting your old room back. Time moves, roles change. And forgiveness inside a family that also happens to be a centuries-old institution doesn't come wrapped in hugs and photo ops. It comes with conditions, boundaries, and a long memory. So when the engines finally roar and the cameras catch that solitary figure heading toward the jet, it isn't just a travel moment. It's the closing of one dream and the uncertain opening of another. A prince who gambled on a new kingdom of fame and freedom, now returning to the old one not as a conquering hero, but as a man who learned that walking away is easy, living with it is the hard part. The flight wasn't just a change of country, it was the moment the fantasy officially cracked. Somewhere above the Atlantic, wrapped in that strange silence only private jets and emotional freefalls share, he was no longer the headline-grabbing rebel or the polished streaming-era humanitarian. He was just a man in transit, watching the life he built in California shrink into coastline and clouds. And the cruelest part? The world wasn't shocked anymore. It was watching with a kind of grim curiosity, like spectators at the final act of a drama they'd followed for years. Back in Montecito, the lights didn't go out, but the energy shifted. Staff moved more quietly. Cars came and went with less fanfare. The carefully curated image of a power household shaping global conversations started to feel like a set after filming wraps, still standing, but hollow, waiting to be dismantled. Neighbors who once boasted about their royal adjacency suddenly had no comment. In celebrity culture, silence is the first sign you've slipped down the priority list. Across the ocean, the reception wasn't dramatic. No palace balcony, no choreographed reunion, just the quiet logistics of a return that felt more administrative than emotional. Insiders whispered that the approach was deliberate. Keep it low, keep it controlled, keep it private. The institution had no intention of turning personal fallout into public theater. If there were conversations, they would happen behind walls that had witnessed centuries of family fractures and political storms. What really made jaws drop was how seamlessly everything else kept moving. While his situation dominated gossip panels and late-night monologues, the royal calendar ticked on with ruthless normalcy. School visits, charity launches, overseas tours planned months in advance. Fresh images of duty and continuity rolled out like clockwork. The contrast was brutal, one storyline collapsing in real time, the other projecting calm, future-focused stability. And then came the emotional undercurrent nobody could package into a press release: the children. Commentators, influencers, and armchair analysts all circled the same question: what does legacy look like when geography, titles, and family ties are all in flux? Sympathy flickered there, even among critics. Because beyond contracts and reputations, this was about kids growing up between worlds, caught in decisions they never made, but would one day have to understand. Meanwhile, she didn't disappear, but the tone changed. Fewer grand statements, more carefully chosen appearances. Branding experts dissected every move, debating whether the strategy would be reinvention, resilience, or quiet retreat. The era of explosive tell-alls seemed to be giving way to something more cautious, as if both sides finally understood that every public word now carried legal, financial, and reputational weight. The spotlight was still there, just hotter, harsher, less forgiving. In royal circles, the mood was described less as anger and more as finality, not the slamming door kind, but the soft click of a lock turning. The message, according to those who claimed to know the inner workings, was simple. Family feelings are one thing, institutional roles are another. Love can exist in private. Responsibility is handled in public. And the two don't always overlap the way fairy tales promise. For him, the psychological whiplash had to be immense. 1 year you're producing documentaries about your truth, commanding global attention with every interview. The next, you're navigating legal fine print, logistical uncertainty, and the humbling realization that influence built on narrative can evaporate faster than influence built on structure. Reinvention is glamorous in theory, brutal in practice when the safety nets are gone. Observers couldn't stop replaying the early days, the wedding, the cheers, the sense that a modern chapter of the monarchy had begun. That version of the story felt almost surreal now, like a glossy prologue to a saga that spiraled into interviews, accusations, estrangements, and finally this: distance, paperwork, and a plane ticket that symbolized more than miles. But here's the twist nobody can script neatly. A fall from grace doesn't automatically equal a permanent ending. History, royal and otherwise, is full of comebacks, reconciliations, quiet redefinitions. The difference is that any future chapter will look nothing like the past. No instant restoration. No pretending the last few years didn't happen. Just slow, complicated rebuilding, if it happens at all. Public opinion, that most unpredictable judge, remains split but fatigued. The outrage has dulled into something closer to caution. People aren't gasping anymore, they're shrugging, waiting to see what the next move is. And in the attention economy, indifference can be more dangerous than criticism. It means the spectacle phase is ending, and real-life consequences are taking center stage. Somewhere in all of this is a quieter, more human story. A man who tried to outrun an identity he didn't choose, only to discover that running from something doesn't automatically tell you where to land. Freedom sounded intoxicating. Independence looked powerful. But belonging, roots, and history have a gravity that's hard to escape, even with oceans in between. As the dust continues to settle, one truth hangs in the air heavier than any headline. Fairy tales don't usually end with exile or return. They end with happily ever after. Real life is messier. It's negotiations, regrets, pride swallowed too late, and bridges you only realize you needed after they're gone. And so the rebel prince's story doesn't close with a coronation or a conquest, but with a question mark, suspended between past and future, family and independence, spotlight and shadow. The world is still watching, just more quietly now, waiting to see whether this chapter becomes a cautionary tale or the prelude to a very different kind of redemption.